I've been watching Star Trek lately, and I got to the episode Plato's Stepchildren, which is an episode most people remember as the one with the famous interracial kiss between Kirk and Uhura. And aside from that and a couple other moments here and there, people hate this episode. But for me, it's actually one of my favorites. Not just because of the historical significance, but because it's a really unique look at the psychology of humiliation. A YouTube comment is what inspired me to watch this episode, and it's one that gets analyzed a lot. But I'm surprised a lot of people don't focus on this part of it, even if they mention it. Like all negative emotions, it's important to understand. Humiliation is more than just a deeper form of embarrassment. Embarrassment's an acknowledgement of self-consciousness when a person does something socially unacceptable, or socially wrong. Humiliation, however, is the loss of status, respect, and dignity, which is connected to power. Star Trek has a lot of episodes about power and how it corrupts. Charlie X, Who Mourns for Adonais, The Squire of Gothos. But unlike the other episodes where the antagonist has no real power over the character's actions, here they do. Plato's Stepchildren has a much better take on that because it does go deeper into the damage unchecked power does to people in the form of humiliation. In this episode, the Enterprise meets Alexander, a dwarf who lacks telekinesis in a eugenics-created society of otherwise average-sized telekinetic people. As a result, he's forced to be a buffoon, the court jester, a punching bag for the rest of the planet. When Dr. McCoy refuses to stay behind to be the planet's doctor, this enrages the leader, Parman. Kirk and Spock, as a result, get a taste of what Alexander goes through on a regular basis when Parman takes control of their bodies, with their minds conscious, but completely unable to stop it. And you get a series of silly but otherwise very intense torture scenes. Both are forced to sing and dance. Spock is forced to laugh and cry, which is particularly dangerous for an emotionally controlled Vulcan. And this happens. What people most often criticize is how silly the torture scenes are, how long they go on, or just how plain uncomfortable it is to watch. But there are story reasons for it. The silliness of what they're forced to go through shows that while Kirk and Spock are clearly suffering, to Parman, who's the puppet master, it's just a game and becomes an example of his utter disregard for others' freedom. The equivalent of someone saying, "It's just a joke, man." The length of the scenes help bring the audience into the experience as well, showing us what the characters are going through and not just telling us. Because the torture is more psychological, we are forced to go through the same discomfort and suffering that Kirk and Spock do. We have no idea when it will end, but we want it to for their sake and for our own. And in the context of the story, because humiliation is not easy to experience, it shows just how awful it is to have basic freedom of your own body stripped away from you. The follow-up scene where Spock regains control of his own body and emotions, and Kirk and McCoy acknowledge their situation, provides key insight on how to deal with it.
Can you do anything for him?
There is no medicine that can help him. He'll have to come through this himself.
I trust they did not injure you too much, Captain.
My muscles are sore, that's all.
The humiliation must have been most difficult for you to bear. I can understand.
The release of emotions, Mr. Spock, is what keeps us healthy. Emotionally healthy, that is.
That may be, Doctor. However, I have noted that the healthy release of emotion is frequently very unhealthy for those closest to you.
Which just goes to prove that there's no such thing as a perfect solution.
So it would seem.
To summarize, no instant miracle pill can help. Some people process their emotions quietly because lashing out and losing control further harms loved ones. Others need their healthy release of emotions in order to work through it. There's no perfect solution on how to process humiliation, and it's not easy by any means. However, acknowledging how you feel, realizing that you're not alone, reminding yourself that you're worthy of dignity as a person, and having the right support system will help you move past it. It's this that helps Alexander realize his own humanity, that he didn't deserve his abuse, and that he is indeed worthy of respect and dignity.
First time anybody ever thought of my life before his own.
It's also very easy to let that feeling of powerlessness get to you, and justify becoming as heartless as Parman, as it is to abuse the power that he has without that. Alexander briefly slips into this mindset. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy nearly do too.
Do you still feel anger toward Parman?
Great anger.
And you, Dr. McCoy?
Yes, Spock. And hatred.
Then you must release it, gentlemen, as I must master mine.
Many people in the audience, by hating this episode, go through exactly the same thing that the characters do. At the end, the Enterprise is able to replicate the Platonians' power, and that is enough to have Parman begging for mercy. This is another example of humiliation, but in a slightly different context. While sadly Parman does largely get away with the worst of his actions, he is reminded that he can be beaten. Parman's humiliation is a reminder that his control over the universe is still limited, that he is fallible, and can lose his status too. Our first introduction to him is that a mere scratch was fatal to him. When he was finally outmatched, there's no final showdown before he starts begging for mercy. While many may be unsatisfied by the lack of revenge towards Parman, there is a lot to be admired in the character's actions. The Enterprise and Alexander show extreme strength by choosing not to give in to anger and hatred. They chose their humanity. Meanwhile, Alexander developed a newfound sense of dignity and is able to start a new life elsewhere thanks to that humanity. Star Trek stands the test of time because, while also flawed, at its best, it's a show about humanity. Part of what makes someone human is their dignity, or their right to be valued for their own sake. And this episode shows what happens when that humanity is taken away.